Today, we have the pleasure to discuss with Kyle Basler-Reeder. Kyle is Global Open Innovation Lead at ExxonMobil. Hi, Kyle.
Hello.
So, Kyle, I think will be super interesting to deep dive in what a big company like ExxonMobil is currently innovating. Again, today open innovation is the key word, but as most of the keyword, there are multiple meanings, multiple ways of doing, multiple different tools that might be used. As far as I know, ExxonMobil has been mostly focusing on one across the multiple tools that the Open Innovation Building is based upon. It's focused mostly on one tool, that is Venture Client. But first of all, it will be interesting for our audience to know you. So it might be good to get a bit of your background, and maybe just for the one that do not know ExxonMobil, provide a bit of context and ExxonMobil.
All right. Well, great. Well, hey, it's great to be here. And I think what I'll do is I'll start with an introduction, a little bit about who I am and my journey, and I'll blend that into what are we doing at ExxonMobil in 2024 in the innovation space. So my name's Kyle Basler-Reeder. I joined the company about 9 years ago as an exploration geophysicist. My role was to help geologists and engineers build images of the Earth and figure out where to drill our wells, so where we're exploring for hydrocarbon resources in the subsurface. I did a number of rotational assignments, machine learning, imaging, all sorts of different things. And what I found over the last 3 to 4 years, I started really learning innovation as a discipline, and not just as innovation is cool new stuff. Innovation is a science, it's a system, it has processes, workflows, etc. And I really started to delve into those flows. This was about 3 or 4 years ago. We did an innovation accelerator round in the company. You know, the classic, you kind of put an idea in the box, they pick their favorite ones, you do a pitch. I actually progressed with one of those projects. And at the end of that project, the feedback was, Kyle, you really set the gold standard, is the quote. Essentially, the way that I approached it, I used a design thinking approach, really got in there, thought about decision science, boundaries, etc. And they really liked that work. So they brought me back as a senior sort of innovation coach. This is all just a hobby at this time. It's on the side, you know, I'm reading some books, things like that. What happened is the company, so now I'll kind of get into where does this fit into what ExxonMobil is doing. Again, this is about 3 or 4 years ago. The company started to see the need for more external leveraging. We needed to get more externally engaged. You know, you're very well familiar with this, but the external landscape is huge. You know, we're talking like over 1 billion freelancers, 300 million startup companies coming in every year, 600 million entrepreneurs are out there. So there's a huge amount of activity outside. And there was a recognition that even though we have huge amounts of talent and information and data and really well-established processes, et cetera, there was still a huge opportunity outside. And so I started to get involved in that effort. And what happened is I was essentially put into a full-time position. My title when I started was actually External Leveraging Coordinator. So literally coordinating different external efforts, trying to get the maximum leverage. And, you know, back at that time, about 3 years ago, I really didn't know a whole lot. I'll just put it that way. I was learning and I was reading, and, you know, I looked around in the company, and what I did is I did this very broad interview campaign. So I interviewed over 200 people. put all those learnings into a series of basically PowerPoint packs. Is how I got started. I had about 20 different PowerPoint packs. I had one for open sourcing, one for crowdsourcing, one for, venture clienting, working with vendors, etc. And then I started using those tools. Now, this was all in the upstream. Remember, I come from where we're actually finding the oil, drilling for oil. What happened a few months into that effort, basically they said, hey, why don't you just broaden your scope to the whole company? Now, that's a whole nother series of learnings. This is a big company. Chemicals, fuels and lubes. There's a lot of parts after the oil is drilled before it gets to the consumer. So it took me a while to kind of get to know those different folks. I engaged with about 110 teams over the last year and a half across the company. And now I would say I am firmly a ExxonMobil wide open innovation program, problems small to large, things that are fast, things that'll take years. And ExxonMobil, I'll just say it in short, innovation is booming at ExxonMobil. We have a lot of new businesses we're launching. You can go on our website and see for yourself, read more. But particularly in our low carbon solutions business, there's a lot of new segments that are coming, and those new segments they need new solutions and they need new ideas. And I think that's a great place for open innovation. But don't forget these other parts of ExxonMobil. These are very large organizations. So even a small win, if you scale that across it can be a huge success. So even some of those more core innovations, we're finding a lot of activity and we're finding a lot of success.
I think you say a couple of things that are super relevant. Number one is you say, when I started doing this job, and you came from your own background, by the way, I'm interviewing most of people doing your job. And I think the only constant that I found is each of you has his own path and his own background. So we have people with humanistic studies, with engineering studies, with science, and that have done different experiences. So substantially, what we are discussing here, that this novel practice called open innovation, substantially, we are still in an experimentation phase to see how it works, and each of you is finding his own formula. And so I think I like when you say, I didn't know what to do. I just start talking to people, trying to find my own way, and then test it and make it work. This is number one that I think is interesting. Mm-hmm. The second part that you say that I liked a lot is innovation sounds like creativity, but at the end is discipline. At the end is project management. At the end is sales. And so can you explore a bit more this final part? Because I think it's relevant. Because again, particularly in a large organization, you can move a dent, but again, you need to prepare the field, drill down, open the doors, walking the corridors. How this is the daily job of open innovation manager.
Well, let me just say, when I got started in open innovation, I agree that we all have different pathways on how we get here. They say the same thing about geophysics, by the way. We come in through very different ways. So I guess I'm just wandering through all these different journeys. But I would just say that when I came into the role, I really had this vision of basically a flow chart. That was my goal. I want a flow chart. Someone comes into my office, they say, I need some help. I want to be more external. And then, boom, I start asking questions. I can actually proudly say after, more than 2 years of doing this, I believe I do sort of have this flow chart. So what I would say, in open innovation at ExxonMobil, it starts with a series of questions that are going to help you frame how you proceed. Those questions at a high level, the most important one is how much time do you have? I've had people come and they say, yeah, I need to get some external opinions, et cetera. Yeah, I have 2 days. Okay, if you have 2 days, there's only a few tools that I have that can actually fit that. Next question, how much funding do you have? Some folks, they don't have any funding at all. Some folks, they basically say, tell me everything you have because I'll consider whatever you got. Next up, what about IP? Okay, some teams, they're trying to build something proprietary, novel. IP is very important. Another team, they may be saying, that's not really important for what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to get this done. I'm not trying to build a new hammer. just find me the best hammer and I'll buy it. So sort of some of those framing questions, do you want to remain confidential, et cetera? There's a few others in there that I might ask about, but that's going to help me frame what's the right tool for the job. Now, if we have some time, if we have at least, a few months, I like to do very rigorous internal landscaping. This is a really big place, a really rich history. I mean, we're talking about 150 years of history, huge company, lots of diverse skill sets. I like to start connecting those people to other units inside the company. And what I have found is that there's often a unit over in some other place. Like if this is someone who's drilling the oil wells like I used to, well, guess what? There's other people who deal with pipes, right? There's our refineries. They have to deal with pipes. There's our midstream with pipes. So if you have a question about a pipe problem, let's go talk to those other folks. And I find that roughly about half of the time, it's pretty consistent. I can connect that team to another team. They start a dialogue, and then they basically say, Kyle, this was great. We'll let you know if we need some more help, pretty much is what happens. So that's pretty common. Once you're sort of through internal landscaping, you haven't found anything, you have a good idea on the parameters, how much time you have, the budget, et cetera, then that's really where I start to choose what tool I'm going to bring in to bear. And that really, to me, that really boils down to a TRL question. If we're talking about a TRL 2 is okay, this is a research team, we're looking for fresh ideas, we might go out there with something like a crowdsourcing approach. If they're looking for something a bit more developed, TRL 5+, something that they don't want to start from scratch, we don't have a research team, that's really more like a request for proposals type approach. And that's where, we really prefer to get into this kind of venture clienting role, working with them. We're basically a customer. We're telling them what we need. Now, we're a big customer. We have a lot of technical expertise, a lot of history, so we can really help those startups grow. And then the third one is really around these talent models. These are very common that I like to use. Some people call them expert interviews. We might bring in a group of different experts into a workshop format. Now, those are a bit of a different tool. Now, that's not necessarily a TRL thing. That might be you're just looking for some insights at the very beginning of a project, a new area, new to ExxonMobil space that we're not familiar, or it could be a very developed space. It's just a big decision you're making and you're looking for increased confidence. And so let's kind of have a workshop with some experts and get their opinions and make sure that we haven't had any blind spots. That's at a high level. There's about 30 other tools that I use, but I think that was a decent take, and then on the back end, let's not talk about procurement and legal and IT and these other processes, because that's not exciting. But I do include those in my sort of flow chart, right? Because those things are important and you can't forget about those, because otherwise your projects aren't going to work.
Have you introduced, while working with external entity, I think startups, have you able to implement a sort of fast track to onboard them a bit faster than usual, or this is something where there is some internal barriers?
So when I'm talking to these teams, right, I'd put it at about 120 teams I've talked to so far. It's very, very common that somebody comes off the microphone and they say, Kyle, I like what you're saying, but I don't have time to go through all these process barriers, X, Y, Z, and ABC. And, what I would tell you is I have basically fast-tracked everything. If it's procurement, if it's legal, I've put together really simple to follow guidelines on how to do it fast. I went and interviewed those people. I asked them, I said, what's important to you? Why does this take so long? So the places where it can be sped up, templates, tricks, guidelines, I've put all that in one place. I've made it easy for folks. The places where it can't be sped up, what I tried to do there is help people have a sense of empathy. So why do I have to fill out this form? Why do we do this? I tried to go and get the other side and get the stories, so that at least I think it makes it easier for people to do something if you can at least tell them why. So yeah, I would say I fast track pretty much everything within the company. There's always efforts to make things faster and more streamlined. All of those processes at ExxonMobil are improving. And then again, I tell people, if that's the problem you have, I have a PowerPoint for that. I'll send them over my procurement pack, my legal pack, my IT pack. All of these have those tips, tricks, and guidelines to help them get through quicker.
Talking about venture clients, so still, this is, I think, the most interesting part of your job. Can you tell us a bit about the overall numbers, which is the deal flow of solution that you scout every year? How many ballpark number of pilot projects that typically, how long does it take from the first meeting to get to the pilot start? Which is the average length of a pilot? What is the ratio from turning those pilots into something that has been deployed at scale? Can you give us some numbers just to understand which is the current flow?
I can take a shot. You know, what I would tell you is it's a big place, and you know, I don't get to see. I probably get to see 5% of what we're actually doing. Just to be totally honest. However, what I could tell you is, if I were to talk about how many opportunities are we seeing, we have tried to estimate that. You know, this is in the thousands. As a company, there's thousands of opportunities that are coming, startup companies, you know, new ideas. So that it's in the thousands. In terms of execution, what I would tell you is, so this term venture clienting, right? In the States, I find not many people actually are familiar with this phrase. When I learned about venture clienting and I said, what is that? What exactly are you saying? I said, wow, that's what we like to do. Okay, so the way that we like to operate is we like to operate as a customer, as a big customer. You know, we have global facilities that we can test your solutions in. We have really deep expertise that we can bring to bear. And I've been on some of those calls, and I think those companies are getting a lot of value from these discussions that they're having with some of our technical folks. If the startup runs into a challenge, well, guess what? That's our challenge now too. And that's something I think that we're really good at, is helping you find solutions to problems and challenges. So that's the mode we run in. The ones that I've had my hands on, these have an extremely high chance of success. I mean, in terms of actually doing a pilot, getting it in, getting it done, getting it funded, this is a very high percent. It's well over 50% of these opportunities that we chase, we actually do something with it. Now, the real test of this type of thing for me, I'll just speak to my program, because I don't really have a good feeling for the entire corporation. But the opportunities that I've been involved in, I would just tell you that I get this question a lot. It's a fair question. We have had some pilots that were successful, that already added value. You know, they're already have a good return, if you will. But I do believe that we're going to need some more time in order to really get to some of those other metrics around percentages and things like that. And what I would say is, it's a portfolio approach. That's the way that I look at it. Some of these bets are small, some of them are big, some are risky, some are not. And in aggregate, it's extremely successful. That's all that I could really say at a high level, is that this works. It's fast. It's pretty lightweight, in fact, and people are seeing really good results. And so one of the big things I'm trying to do is raise awareness around the company of these types of workflows, because it can be done actually pretty easily and pretty quick. And it's going to save you a ton of time instead of trying to build it from scratch.
Yeah, that's for sure. Another big topic, again, we work and speak with many corporates that over the years developed this way of approaching startups that now is commonly referred as venture clienting. Mm-hmm. It is not just actually for the venture client, but broadly speaking, for anything that is attached to open innovation, is to measure impact, find the proper KPIs to show the progress and show the value has been created. Because one of the problems that we most of the time we do have is that I honestly, working with many corporate like you, I know that you are producing value for the company. This is a given. The problem is how to show the value produced, the impact produced to the constituency, A, and B, to show it while you are not at the destination, but you are mid of the journey, during the journey. Because again, you are producing something that is going to reshape the company, to change the company. And then it's something, unfortunately, you cannot measure pregnancy halfway again, or you get to the point at the end. Yes, you can estimate, but essentially just estimate. And still, also when you deploy a pilot, you start scaling up, the value is still at. So you need to make some assumptions. So the question for you is, how do you manage communication, internal mostly, because again, you need to keep your constituency up to date. You need to continue to get support. We are in a period of time when there are budget cuts across departments, and sometimes innovation is one of the first to be heard, because again, it's the one that's probably is perceived as, yes, it's nice to have, it's not something very, very critical in the time of need. So how do you communicate in order to keep attention and that your activity is properly valued? Which KPIs are you using for measuring the activity that you're running, and see how do you measure impact? So this is the question for you.
So I'm really glad you asked me that question, because I'd like to give Mind the Bridge a shout out for when I was doing all those interviews. I didn't just stay internal. I also interviewed 50 to 100 people outside roughly. And I did connect with your organization. And what you all taught me, one idea that has really resonated with me is this idea that there are different eras of a program. When I got started doing these interviews, talking to these people, I had a lot of people looking at me saying, "What are you doing? Are you serious? That you're doing 5 interviews a day for months?" There was a little bit of a question there of the value. Do you really need to do more than about 20, Kyle? So I was in that earliest phase where there really were no metrics. The metric was, how many interviews have I done? Getting into the early execution, I think the input metrics were really important. How many people am I talking to? How many problems am I scoping? How many am I connecting to internal solutions? Like I said, how many were rejected and why, et cetera? How long is it taking? As I started to get into the more advanced execution era, if you will, which is where I would say I am today, it's important to track how many projects are we doing, how many teams are we scoping. All of those are important. We're starting to get into value metrics. So the way that I approach it is I ask the team 3 questions, and I follow up every now and then to check in. The first question is, do you have any actual implementations planned? If the answer is no, that's a metric, right? So we found ideas, they're not being used yet. There's some things I might want to do there, follow up, do they need resourcing, et cetera. The second question, you have an implementation planned. Okay, that's great. What's the projected value of that implementation if it works? And what do you think the chance of success is? Now, chance of success is tough. That's not an easy thing to estimate. That's another area that I've spent considerable amount of time is trying to help teams figure out how to estimate that. But that's the first thing that I like to probe on, and is things that are in the future. The second one is, which pilots have you completed, and did they produce any value? So if you have a completed pilot that actually added some value, that's great. You have a planned pilot, that's great. The last bit is, if this thing is successful and we scale this across the other implementations across the company, which this is the most important question in my opinion. What do you think the total projected value would be? And what do you think the chance of success of that would be? So even if your pilot is successful in one place, it's not 100% chance you're going to scale it everywhere else. There's a lot of other organizational considerations, et cetera, timing considerations. So those are the questions that I like to ask. And then you basically, just really simple, I'm multiplying that chance of success by those 3 outcomes, and then I'm doing a sum. That's kind of where I'm at. It's pretty basic. I am starting to look at things like, how long did the project take? How long did it go from the first meeting to the actual execution to the pilot? So now I'm kind of getting into what I call, again, this is credit to your organization, I call this the era of optimization, which is where we're really going to start to fine tune on those metrics. Now, when it comes to, chance of success of a project in general, return on investment, those types of optimized parameters, my communication is, I don't know how to answer that yet. So give me some time, but I can tell you just that front end, that front piece of pilots that were executed that added value, that alone is powering the rest of this entire program. So we're doing some risky moonshot type stuff. I don't know if they'll go anywhere, but that's okay, because I'm keeping along with those things that you plug in, you get a quick win. Those stories are sufficient to keep people happy.
No, very, very well said. I think, again, what you say makes a lot of sense. Obviously, devil is in the details, meaning that I think one of the main hurdles that many open innovation units like yours are facing on a daily basis is the ability to follow up after pilot. Because when you hand over, it's been handed over, and technically speaking, you don't have the right to the opportunity to really understand what is actually happening. So you start with a sort of best case, you remain with a sort of business plan, and then you don't know exactly what will be of it. Also, because if you are putting some technology inside something else, it's very difficult to enucleate the value out of that. And so what we are being discussing with many leaders that are facing the same issues is that probably we need to force this sort of audit to understand exactly what is happening. Obviously, you cannot do across the entire organization, across all the pilots, across all the implementation, because you get nuts. But what can really be done is to cherry pick the one that have the largest potential, and to follow and measure properly, and forcing the organization in the condition of the handover that you have substantially the audit right to understand what is happening. Yeah. If not, at the end, you're becoming just a sort of gatekeeper. You open the door inside the organization, then you open the door inside the business unit, and what happens outside of this door is no longer in your control. Or maybe you are penalized for something that happens after the second door. So technically, it's not your responsibility anymore. And we know how bad in organization the sentence "is not my responsibility, it's not my job" can produce on results. So that is what we technically trying to facing. Again, we are trying to find some KPIs and be replicated, trying to find some best practice to measure the outcomes. Because at the end, what I really believe is that the job of you guys is a sort of heroic, because again, you are in between a world that is huge, as you pictured before, and on the other hand, huge organization that have their daily job as a forced line of duty, and whatever is beyond that, they actually do not care. They care minimally. And then if you are not able to continue to communicate the value and get some audience about that, at the end, when there is some recession, reorganization, bad internal condition, whatever, you got cut, and then years of good job are trash away. So the dirty water and the kids. So this is what we are really fighting to find best way to defend the job that we believe has a gigantic value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's two things. One is shots on goal. So just people sometimes they'll ask me, well, how did you get so many projects? How are you so successful? Well, I knocked on doors. I had meetings with over 100 teams, and some of those were tough. But some of them, a project or two came, and just knocking on those doors, kind of getting out there. That was number one. I got to do as many projects as possible, so some of these are going to lead to something, and that's what I've seen. Number two is I try to head that off at the very beginning. Someone says, "Oh, hey, I need this new technology XYZ." Okay, great. Where are you going to pilot that? Who's gonna fund that? And then I want that person to be there in the room when we get started. I want law in the room. I want everyone in all these stakeholders that can derail things. I want them in the room from day one, and I want to make sure everyone is nodding their head. And I'll tell you what. Sometimes in those discussions, we find a new piece of information, and we decide to not proceed, and that's okay. That's about 20% of the time. This early alignment meeting phase, we don't proceed. But to your point, I find if you don't have that all lined up ahead of time, I don't think the chance of success can be very high. You can get derailed 20 different ways along the way. So,
no, I like the metaphor, shots on goal. Yes, again, we need to try. And then one thing that we notice is that most of the time, particularly in the early days, you need to be politically in picking up the units to work with. That might sound strange, but at the end, there is not the same sensibility and the same mindset across the organization. So start working with the one that are a bit more open, get some quick wins, get some results, and then you scale to other places. Despite probably, if you look at the potential value to be extracted, are not probably the first places to start with. But again, if you start the most complicated challenges, probably it turns into nothing. So this is the stuff that we most of the time we see.
Yep. And I'll just say this, coming into a meeting with a bunch of organic chemists as a physicist, and not knowing a lot about what they do, you don't really know what you're walking into in that room. And so, some of these teams, no follow-ups, no nothing, and nothing came, and that's okay. But you're right. There are certain teams that have higher organizational readiness, as we describe it. Those teams, those are the ones that you go and you execute the project. And then what you do is the next year you come back to that team that wasn't ready, and you have that person who's in an adjacent unit. That person halfway through, you say, okay, we're going to have Sarah come up now, and she's going to talk about the project. And they look over and they say, whoa, we did something here. And I've seen it happen. I've seen the body language shift from who is this guy to, oh, wow, we actually did it. This actually works. So that was a big part of my strategy with going broad in the organization. Just like you said, you got to find those early adopters. And those early adopters, I got to tell you, these sometimes are not the typical employee. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, because again, at the end, innovation is a mindset. And again, another important component, another important outcome of the work that you are doing is culture. Because you are spreading culture, spreading different ways of doing things, spreading openness into organization that most of the time are based on the not invented here syndrome. They are not exactly super excited to work with third parties. So you are sitting, and this job has a value. The problem, again, how to measure it and to make the rest of the organization know that you have done this, and then we have a better organizational culture. You have a better organizational readiness to do innovative things that probably was 3-5 years ago. So probably if you take 10,000 feet and then look at what you have done in the over 3-4 years of doing your job, you see totally different organization. But it's very difficult to measure, it's very difficult to perceive on a daily basis. And so that's some of the big outcomes of the job that you're doing. And again, intangible and all the intangible things are difficult to be measured.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, in short, I'll just say it is a culture change journey. And it took me almost a year, I would say, into this program. I thought to myself, oh, this is cool. I'm going to go execute some projects and work on cool technical problems and work with outside companies. This sounds fun. And then I realized I've actually been asked to lead a culture change journey. And that really flipped my entire way of thinking about what I'm doing. You're spot on. It is a culture change journey. And I don't believe you can manually change a culture. But what I do believe is executing these projects, showing people how it works. I've really been focused on recognition. I implemented a recognition program, these commendation coins that I handed out to teams. I try to get them in front of their senior management. I try to send messages to their management and inform them about this great work they're doing and how they're leading the company in innovation and all of this. And so you're spot on. That is the name of the game for a program like mine when you're just a couple years old.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that could be a good definition to define your job profile. And again, it's a big task. It's not something that happens overnight. So it will be too easy. And so through different tools, you're actually spreading culture and making the company to what I believe is the ultimate goal, that is survival. Because again, organization get obsolete, business lines dried out, fade out, and you are actually helping the company to get a brighter future. And unfortunately, working long term is difficult to be measured and assess in between, so particularly short term. So this is all the the beauty and fascinating challenges that people working in open innovation has to face. So I think you are one of the heroes that are on the front and in this large organization. And so again, congratulations for the job that you have been done, and let's keep talking and updating about your progress, because I believe probably if we talk again in 6 to 12 months, you have a lot of new things and experiences and learnings to be shared with our audience. Thank you so much, guys.
Well, thank you. And thank you for providing me some great resources when I was at that very beginning. I think your organization has a lot to offer folks that are trying to learn more about open innovation.